Hi everybody, this is Gene Joly from Musician's Friend. I'm here today again with Marcus Ryle, co-founder of Line 6. In the last session we talked about Line 6, the formation of Line 6 as a company, and their first ventures into the guitar market. And we talked about modeling amplification and the groundbreaking pod. The next logical extension, obviously, there would be to attack the instrument itself. And Variax was the result of that truly groundbreaking product. Why don't you tell us about that today?
Yeah, the Variax, it's just the whole notion of a modeling guitar was, another kind of new concept. But the inspiration for that was just really the realization that if we wanted to really give guitar players complete control over their tone, it needed to be the entire signal path, so to speak. Every great guitar player knows, the source of tone is your fingers. That's something we can't help you with, right? And that's why every guitar player sounds different, even on the same gear. But from there, there's what instruments you play, what effects you're going through, what amps, what cabinets, microphones, the whole thing until you're finally moving some air, right? And it was great that we now had, effects and the amps and the cabs and so on. But what if you want your guitar to sound different? Why shouldn't there be a way to unlock that creative potential in the instrument itself, which then enables you to do things you wouldn't normally be able to do, especially live, like, suddenly switch between two entirely different guitars in the middle of a song, or different tunings, or things like that. In a way, it started out very much like our amplifier work. It was a research project with some great engineers looking at, what exactly happens with a magnetic pickup and the magnetic aperture, what nonlinear aspects there are, how the position of the pickup matters, body resonance, string decay, all these elements looking at the physicality of the instrument so that we could create software models of different instruments. A lot of people confuse that type of technology with a guitar synthesizer, where in that case, the instrument is really just a trigger to trigger other sounds. What was important to us is you can't lose anything that a guitar player has in their fingers. So quite literally, the models are about taking the strings of that guitar and imagining them on a different instrument. But everything about your playing style is captured because the audio you're hearing is the actual strings. It's the strings now running through software models of different pickups and body resonance and so on. So, if your strings are dull, you put a new set of strings on a Variax, everything will sound a little brighter because that is the source. It is your strings. But now that it's all digital, we can instantly change from any guitar to another guitar. We can individually tune each string, so you could have any tuning you want, including doing impossible things like, drop your low E an octave to do some bass if you want. And on top of that, we could digitally connect with the rest of the system. So this notion of from your fingertips to your ears was truly possible through what we call the Dream Rig. So that a Variax can connect right to a Pod HD 500X, right to a DT25 amp, or to our Stage Source full range speakers. And now with a single button push, you could go from, the model of a Les Paul through a Tube Screamer into a Marshall stack, and then instantly it's an acoustic 12-string with a nice, LA2A compressor model and some reverb. That's kind of was always the dream, is to be able to really capture everything that a guitarist might want to have at their disposal and make it that accessible to everyone. So
I have to ask you, I found out recently that you and I share a passion for certain 1970s era British prog rock bands, and one guitar player in particular who we were both heavily influenced by. You got to tell the story on how it's come full circle with you with Variax.
Well, as a keyboard player, obviously, bands like Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Yes were big influences when I was young, Keith Emerson and Rick Wakeman. Being into Yes, you couldn't help but be drawn to just the range of sound and the unique style of Steve Howe. So
I cannot tell you how many hundreds of hours I spent trying to learn Steve Howe licks on Fragile and Close to the Edge.
Exactly. It's sad. I tried too. I didn't get very far. But it's just an amazing palette. And then, of course, I saw Yes play live, and I remember for years, just seeing the number of guitars Steve would have to take on tour and all the effects and amps just to try to recreate.
Electric sitar, all that stuff.
Exactly. Guitars up on stands, steel, and so on. And, couldn't help but have that that influence, which is shared by others here, influenced the types of things that we'd even model. It's like you'd want to get that, Benson Echo Rec or a choral sitar model and so on, because these were things that were just part of that whole lexicon of tonal range. Personally, really gratifying that a handful of years back, Steve Howe, I think he tells a story. He walked into a music shop in England, and it was a Variax, and someone was telling him about it, and he really took a liking to it. Obviously, not knowing anything about the connection, I've had a chance to get to know him since then, and he's a wonderful guy. He's really creative, and the Dream Rig has now become a real staple in his setup, so that he can have, he has a whole bank of Asia sounds and a whole bank of Yes sounds, and it's just really incredible to see him playing, an acoustic 12-string or a choral sitar on a Variax.
It's got to be incredibly gratifying.
Yeah, fantastic.
He had to have the most massive guitar rig of anybody out there at the time.
Absolutely.
Just mind-blowing what he did. So shifting gears a little bit here, you've talked to me before about the democratization of technology. So we get great sound to all levels of musicians, not just the pros, but people just starting out and so forth. And I think you guys definitely hit that with the Spider series. So tell us about that. Was there any debate about going that far down in price, or?
The thread you can see through kind of the whole lineage, even to things like ADAT and the drum machines and keyboards and so on. It's just, these were all tools that most of us really just wished we could have, but you often, especially as a musician, couldn't afford. And the pod was quite affordable, and we sold a lot of pods. But it was also, you could say it was a product for someone who already kind of knew what the problem was to be solved, right? They probably had some other guitar gear.
They're doing some recording.
They did some recording. It's like, I can't turn my amp up in my apartment, so I need a pod or something like that. They understood that. And the people who were just starting out didn't necessarily know. And when we were kids, starting out meant having a really crappy amp and a really crappy guitar. And you had to be so in love with what you're doing, or have a parent that was whipping you, to stick with it, to move beyond that, and someday be able to have an instrument that's playable and have a sound that's playable. And that's at a point when you don't even really know what something could sound like. So, we really thought, why shouldn't it be possible to have an affordable amp? But for someone who's more starting out, they can start to have some of that great experience of what it feels like to have some big distortion, or great clean sounds, and have some effects even before they maybe even know how they would get those sounds on their own. And the Spider ended up being a really huge success for us, because it did open that door. And it's really great to hear from so many guitar players who really got their early start playing with a Spider and having this huge palette of sound, and be able to learn their first power chord and have it sound huge instead of twink was a big plus.
Well done. I think it changed the course for many, many thousands of musicians in a very positive way. Well, that's it for today. Thanks, everybody, for being here. We'll be here next time. We'll be talking about Line 6's move into the pro audio business. Thanks.